random nonsense that makes no sense but wins somehow.
I felt that way with my Even Hunter deck, that I was like, I literally named it Bad Idea because I assumed that's what it was, and then I played games in casual and I was like winning against real meta decks. I was like, no, this can't be good. And then I played some more games and it didn't feel very good, because there was one game where I literally lost the game on turn 2 against an even shaman that just played the eel, and I never got the board back for the rest of the game. And I was like, oh, okay.
2 mana, 2/3. You lose.
That card is so good.
Yeah, it was that they rolled the 1/1. The first time I've ever seen Searing Totem be like insane. They rolled Searing Totem, killed my 2/3 beast on turn 2, and I couldn't get board back for the rest of the game. And
Even
like,
Hunter can't ever beat River Crocodiles.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's the ladder. Why don't we dig into a little bit here of what's happened this week besides the glaringly obvious, but we'll talk about the glaringly obvious. Time for the news.
So, surprise, surprise, everybody. Patch 11.1 has been released. That would be the one with all the nerfs that we were kind of just we've been talking about for, I feel like, the past 2 or 3 weeks. It was actually, I don't know if this has happened before, but it was like a patch that went through that you didn't have to update the client. Has that happened before? Do you guys remember a time where this has happened before?
I think it's happened before, but I was kind of surprised because we were out eating at Mellow Mushroom, actually, when that happened. And I was like, man, I'm going to have to like download a big patch, and I can't do that on mobile. And then Taylor was like, no, I downloaded it in like 2 seconds. So I got on my phone and I was like, oh, what? Neat. So I didn't have to like re-update like the phone client, which was awesome.
Yeah, I feel like it's happened before, but I couldn't tell you when.
Okay.
Yeah, it feels like it's been a while since that happened, I think.
Well, anyway, I think we're all pretty excited about the new changes. It'll be interesting to see how things actually get shooken out. I actually believe some people were playing and some of the cards still said the old text, but did the nerfed version of it. Like I thought somebody was reading a Dark Pact that still said it regained 8 health, but it was only giving them back 4 as it was supposed to. But
yeah, so Reganis actually tweeted about that on Twitter, and he was like, I think it's a problem with his mobile client. I'm not sure like what he's using, but it was that Call to Arms still said 4, but Gen didn't trigger at the start of the game, and it costed 5. And he was like, this isn't right. What?
Oh, I also have to find this thing. Did you guys know that Clockwork Giant, I believe, counts as a odd cost card? I believe I should have researched this before I brought this up, but I believe somebody was referring to the fact that if Clockwork Giant was in your hand or something, then it didn't trigger either Gen or Baku for whatever deck it's supposed to go in because of how many cards was in your opponent's hand. It was, I don't know, something weird.
I want to know what deck somebody was playing to test this.
So apparently that's the only giant. Well, it's probably wild, some kind of wild giants.
Yes.
But apparently it triggers Baku if it's in your opening hand, or breaks Gen if it's in your opening hand, because the reduction is applied before the check. Which I think that is the only one of the giants that was released in an expansion that's seeing play right now, because I guess Arcane Giant isn't. Well, Arcane Giant would be 12 no matter what, right?
Right.
Yeah, because the other reductions don't matter. So all the others are in Classic, but this one they might have missed because it's in GVG.
Okay. Well, I thought that was interesting and
yes,
worth bringing up. But anyway, the second part I have in here is that the main Hearthstone site put out an article that has the pros reacting to the balance changes in various Twitter comments. Worth a bit of a read, but I guess the most interesting thing, which is probably not that interesting to most people, is that like the comments I'm seeing on articles like this, where like everybody that Play Hearthstone posted was obviously like fairly positive about the nerfs, and then just the comments were like, obviously everybody that you put on here is excited about the nerfs. But I don't know. In general, it seems like pretty good reaction from the pro community on Twitter thus far. I haven't seen anybody who's been overly negative about the nerfs. Is that seem to be what you guys have seen as well?
Well, like, there's no one that's like they should keep everything the same it was. I think there was a brief amount of resistance before they announced the specifics of the nerfs. These are the kind of nerfs that people have been talking about. Not everybody, but a lot of people say the game is digital. Why don't you do small tuning things more often, right? That's the sort of thing that's come up before. I think the closest we've seen to this wave of nerfs was probably the KFT ones, where there were a couple egregious offenders, but then a couple more that were also secretly egregious, like Fiery War Axe. I mean, we knew it was really powerful on 2. We didn't know it was holding the other aggressive decks in the format in check. And along with the Druid nerfs, we got like Hex to 4. And this is, I think, even more subtle than those. It's just costing fixes on cards that are on the verge of too powerful, and the meta was overall balanced. So it's really hard for people to have extreme reactions when the changes are so nuanced. I haven't seen anyone that's like out of their mind thrilled. A lot of people are saying, "Yeah, I'm glad it's better," but I haven't seen anyone that's like, "This is the best meta ever," or blah blah blah. They're just happy they don't have to deal with Quest Rogue anymore.
Yeah, I get that feel. I get that sentiment a lot. That there's a lot of people that seem happy that maybe Quest Rogue will not be as positive. But that actually was like one of the things that was talked about in a lot of the comments. Is a lot of people weren't sure if the nerf to Quest Rogue was actually going to be enough of a nerf. But I've only seen it once on ladder, and it kind of smashed me because Value Shaman does not do well against a bunch of 4/4s because all your removal does 2 to 3 damage to everything, and also Hex is really bad against the Crystal Core. But
yeah. I think the like general reaction I saw was positive. I think the only like criticisms people had were maybe the nerfs like didn't do enough. Like the Dark Pack nerf, it's obviously a downgrade, but how important was the 8 life is like a question I saw asked or like brought up. And then the Quest Rogue, like the matchups are so polarized anyways for Quest Rogue that like it only made its good matchups a little worse because it like still does the same thing and it's still really, really hard to deal with for a control deck. And then like you probably just can't ever beat aggro now. Like before you had like a 20% chance, now it's probably like 5. But yeah, I think the nerfs are all pretty good. I like Reserve Judgment because Spiteful Summoner seems like it might still see some play just because of the sheer amount of power it can give you for 7 mana. And then I don't know, I think Quest Rogue might still be a tournament deck just because of how polarized the matchups really are. I gotta test with it more, but yeah.
Well, if you need somebody to play Quest Rogue, I'm not planning on disenchanting him right away because
Cool.
I enjoy that deck. But speaking, I did want to say something that I didn't get to say when we were talking about our weeks. I had a really, really interesting game that I posted in our Discord. So I really urge people, if they have time, to go take a look at somebody who played against me extremely well. They were playing a full control warlock deck, and I was playing Quest Rogue, and I had a very, very early quest completion, like I want to say turn 5 or 6 with like Sonya. So I just had like a nutter butter start, and the way they played the game was like so perfectly and ended up fatiguing me for exactly lethal at the end. So I highly recommend like that as a game just to watch, and like, you know, I've also had a few people like snap Concede like when they see me play Quest on turn 1, and like you can win games. You just have to play really well and get a little lucky. I wouldn't say they were overly lucky, but they mainly just like the way they metered out their cards was just really impressive to me.
That's actually how I got to Legend on NA, not by fatiguing the Quest Rogue, but I was playing Control Warlock versus Quest Rogue, and I think they quested on 5, and then I killed them with Gul'dan on 11.
Wow.
That's how did you how?
Yeah. I got a Void Lord out real quick, and then I got another one, and then I nethered twice. They didn't have any cards, and then they had taken some damage from dagger hitting some of my minions, and then I Gul'dan'd back 2 Void Lords and 5 Void Walkers, and was just like, pew 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 pew, and they died. And I walked away, and I was like, I can't believe I won that game. But yeah, you just have to play them out sometimes and play them well, and like the win rate's not 100 for the Quest Rogue. Like it is like 80 something, or it was.
Yeah.
Like there are those like 1 out of 5 games that you can win, but most people just concede to save time.
Yeah, and like from my position, it wasn't even like I had a bad hand or like I didn't complete till turn 8. Like I completed really fast with a broken start, and I don't know that I necessarily played the game optimally, but like just the way they played was so impressive to me. I really think it's worth people taking the time to take a look at that replay. But either way, next little item we have here is Hearthstone did another off-meta spotlight, and I thought it was interesting that they did it right before the nerf hit. But I checked, and none of the cards in these decks got hit by the nerfs. So I think there's some pretty cool decks here. The first one on here is a Murloc Warlock. Let that sink in. Murloc Warlock.
That was a thing in vanilla.
Yeah, so this isn't as surprising to me, because when I first started, like Murloc Warlock was like not that far-fetched, because it actually used to be good with like old Murkai and stuff, and like the life tap was enough to like get it to refill. But seeing it nowadays is very interesting.
And it's actually very budget. There are no legendaries in the deck. I'm actually looking. I don't know. I think the War Leader is a epic, and
War Leader,
Nightmare...
Megasaur, and Amalgam are epics.
Okay, and then everything else is common and rare. So I think that deck's pretty sweet. I've actually been seeing a bit of Zoo lately, so this is like a kind of a different variant on a Warlock Zoo list. And then the next list on here looks to be a Dragon Priest combo deck. So kind of taking going back just one set ago, the Divine Spirit Inner Fire is still pretty good. This is playing Wormguard, which I've seen a bit of lately. I haven't seen it that much on ladder, but I've seen it in a bunch of the UHL matches. Maybe just the matches I happen to catch have it in it, but Dustbreaker is still really good. It's just it feels a lot less common to have it because we don't have or oh man, why don't I remember the card name?
Netherspite Historian.
Netherspite Historian, yes, that card.
Yes.
But so that's another deck, and then this last deck on here is a Shutterwalk combo deck. It looks like it doesn't have any of the two. It's not like the value deck that I'm playing that has like Keleseth in it, but it has a couple 2-drops like Doomsayers, so it's kind of a very hard control deck with Hemet Jungle Hunter, which has shown up in a lot of these lists lately, just so that you can kind of or you basically get to where only combo pieces are left in your deck. But it's kind of weird because it has Hagatha and Hemet in it, which doesn't feel like it goes together too well, because if you're playing Hagatha, you kind of want your cheaper minions because you have your hand fills up so fast. So I've actually seen a lot of different Shutterwalk lists lately. I don't know about you guys, but seems like a lot of people are starting to kind of bring it back on Twitter at least.
I mean, it's a go-to like day one deck, and this is day one all over again. I did see Stan Zifka playing a little bit yesterday, and he was playing a full elemental list. He didn't have Hagatha, but he did have Kalimos, and that was kind of sweet. And he had like Fire Plume Harbingers and Murmuring Elementals, and was just all in on the elemental thing. He even had Hot Spring Guardians, which I haven't seen in a while. And really just straight defense, elementals, gain life, do stuff, kill you. And he had Hemet as well, and agreed with your logic because he actually cut Hagatha for Hemet.
Yeah, I feel like that's the way. You either are playing Hagatha and then you want like a bunch of cheap minions to be able to like grind out games where you're on the Hagatha plan, or you want to go this like really combo heavy version that plays like volcanoes. Then you have to play life drinkers, and I know Sifka was playing the 2-drops, the Fire Plume Harbinger and the Murmuring Elemental, but I know Meaty's been doing really well with Shutterwalk Shaman. That's similar to this list in the article, but I don't believe he has like Doomsayers. He's kind of like halfway between value and full combo. But yeah, so three interesting decks. I think all of these, I haven't seen any of this combo priest, but I don't know how good it would be now. But some different ideas for decks for you guys to play. And then Hearthstone Top Decks posted kind of a standout decks from day one after the patch, which has just a whole host of different decks that people were playing to reasonable success. There's so many decks on there, I don't even want to go over all of them. But like some of the standouts are Miracle Rogue, which I saw a bit on the day before the nerfs actually. I know a lot of people were talking about Even Shaman, and we're actually going to go over a bunch of like the winners in our Decksplanation segment. So I'll kind of leave most of this to that part of it. Was there any decks in here that you guys saw that you wanted to talk about before we get to Deckspanations later?
I love what Evident does over at Hearthstone Top Decks. Whenever there's a change, I feel like he doesn't sleep for about 3 days, and just decks just appear out of nowhere, and he just it as soon as a tweet happens, it winds up here. I don't know how he does it, but this has kind of been open on every device that I own since it got published, just to constantly refresh and see what new decks are coming out. It's definitely a slower flow this time than it is usually at the beginning of an expansion, right? Because a lot of people are playing what they know, people are tweaking a card here, a card there. It's definitely a different environment, but there's still a lot of good information out there, and people are trying off-the-wall things. I wonder how many of these things would have been near viable or actually viable in the past meta, and people just didn't try them because they were scared of losing to even Paladin Q-Block, or if those strategies, along with Quest Rogue, were really that oppressive.
Yeah, I'm not sure. What do you think, Appa? Did you have a chance to look at this article or no?
Yeah, I took a look at it, but most of it I thought were like known quantities in that like we saw them played when the expansion came out, a lot of these, but then things kind of settled down to like, oh, this can't be Q Block or this can't be Paladin or whatever. I do like seeing Miracle Rogue again though. I like anti-control decks to be like require some finesse instead of just being like a baseball bat you hit your opponent over the head with. And I think Miracle Rogue is a lot more intricate and leads to more fun games against control. So I'm glad to see people playing that again.
Same. I love that deck. Still real good.
I'll definitely have to play some of it here in the next couple days to see just how good it is. The Tavern Brawl is a repeat. Clone Ball, your you basically get 4 copies of a bunch of random legendaries. The one that I won today, I got Prince Malchezaar as one of my legendaries, but the other ones were like Kel'Thuzad and Mukla. And yeah, Mukla's pretty good because you get this 0 mana spell that reduces the cost of legendary minion by 3, and then it applies it to all copies of that. So I just made a bunch of Muklas really quickly. And I think I actually got to the point where I had Lorewalker Cho in play and Kel'Thuzad, and they kept giving me spells, and it was good for me.
That sounds bananas.
Yes. Did either of you guys get a chance to play it yet or no?
No, I haven't played the arena yet today, or not the arena, the Tavern Brawl. I also haven't played arena, but that's a different thing. I've been playing mostly, just still trying to hit legend on EU. So like I haven't played very much of anything else.
I will slam jam it and get my pack after the show tonight.
Sounds good. The last article we have here is a HS Top Decks article about Gambler's Fallacy. And as much as I'd like to talk about this, Hat was briefly describing it to me before, and it sounds like he knows a whole lot more about it than I do. So why don't you give them a quick rundown about this article here, if you don't mind, Hat?
So Gambler's Fallacy is the illogical, but the incorrect belief, often based in emotion, that any series of random events are related. So that if you flip a coin and you get tails, you say, okay, it's 50-50 odds. It's most likely that the next flip is going to be heads. And you flip the coin, it's tails again. Okay, well that's twice in a row. The next flip is definitely going to be heads. The reality here is that all these events, there might be a probability, a low probability that the sequence of events that you are experiencing is unlikely, but it has to happen at some point unless it's a literal 0% chance. So all of these coin flips are unrelated. Whatever you flip the coin, there's a 50-50 chance of it being heads or tails, but that 50-50 chance never changes. It's not like the next coin flip, well, it's more likely it's going to be heads. And human behavior and human emotion doesn't really interact with that kind of reality super well, especially in games. It's a frustrating gameplay experience when something is probabilistically, I don't think that's a word, but you get the idea of what I'm saying. When something is fair but doesn't feel fun, then it feels unfair. XCOM is a game that's used as an example in this article, and it's a game that is fun but infuriating at times, because it gives you a % chance to hit your target. And if you miss, then it's a turn-based strategy game. If you miss, then your opponent might get a chance to strike back. Whereas if you hit, you might kill their character. So obviously, it can be frustrating when you've got a 75% chance and you miss. And what the game actually does, and this is fairly common in a lot of game design, is that if you miss a 50% shot and then take another 50% shot, it's secretly a 65% shot. % chance shot. The game will actually fudge the numbers in your favor a little bit each time so that the game feels more quote-unquote fair. In reality, it's favoring the stakes towards you, right? It's tipping the scales. But human emotion says, well, something bad happened to me, so something good should happen to me to make up for it, and games will oblige you because the game makers want you to keep playing the games. It's a frustrating experience to get a series of low rolls in a row. Same thing with when your opponent's character in XCOM takes a shot at you. If they hit, they're less likely to hit the next time, and so on and so on. Now in Hearthstone, here's the problem. There are 2 human players. So if you bias towards one, you're biasing against the other. So there's no way to say the game can self-correct for that negative feeling. And you were experiencing, if you think you were getting particularly unlucky, you were just experiencing normal variance. But there's that innate belief that all these events are connected when they're really not. The article talks about managing that impulse and understanding the nature of probability a little bit better. I do strongly recommend reading it. It's a good read. It's very well constructed. And it's by Stonekeep, who's one of their most popular writer over there, at least it's the most prolific writer, I'll say. It's an interesting concept that I think people misunderstand frequently, and Hearthstone is a game where it's difficult to manage emotions. We've said many times in the show it's a game of emotional management, so I would definitely recommend checking it out so you can get a deeper insight into the math behind it.
Yeah, anything to help people manage their tilt, I think is useful read. I know I need to read more about that. And also listen to Blister Guy's podcast, because he's been talking about tilt lately too. And anything to help with that is, I think, useful to your overall enjoyment of the game of Hearthstone, which I think we all want everybody to enjoy Hearthstone as much as possible.
Yeah, the his series lately about finding your frustration was really, really great. Over on Blister Guy's Walk to Work podcast, I definitely recommend checking it out.
And that's all I had for the news this week. Hat, why don't we jump into tournaments?
All right, patrons, I'm going to try and make the audio a little louder because this window update messed with my stuff. Let's see. All right, I think that was slightly better. I'm marking this for later. For some reason, all my bumpers are quiet, and patrons, you will hear this, and non-patrons, you won't hear this. This never happened. Okay.
Which one?
Okay, so let's talk tournaments, because we've got a bunch. We've got a whole bunch of tournaments. We got 3 majors this week. Well, 2 and 2.9. That's what I'm going to call it. We've got the HCT APAC Summer Championship Qualifier. Is that what we call it? The playoff? I don't know what we call it. It's not prelim anymore, but I keep wanting to call it prelim.
I just call it prelim.
The Summer APAC Hearthstone Championship Tour stop. So we had a bunch of people's competing for, as a reminder, this is a conquest tournament. It leads to the World Championship, 4 players per season for winter, spring, and summer, and then 4 players for qualifying based on top point earners. And these are your first qualifiers for this year's Worlds. We had Glory, Blood Trail, Jinsu, and Tansoku, who qualified. The top 8 that did not qualify were Matsuri, Kin 0531, Dakkarp, and XiaoDai. Then we had a Dreamhack tournament, Dreamhack Tours, in Tours, France. And this is a last hero standing tournament. So remember that Conquest, you have to win with each deck. And last hero standing, it's whoever loses with each deck first. You can't play a deck that you've lost with. They all get knocked out. With Conquest, they get eliminated when you win with them. So it's kind of backwards. And with last hero standing, if you play a deck and you win with it, you keep playing it, and the other person has to change their decks. Whereas with Conquest, when you win, you have to change your deck. You can't play with the one you won with. I hope that makes sense. So, Dreamhacks are always last hero standing, or LHS for short. And Maverick took first place in this one. Scruffy was second place. Savat and X-Blizes were third and fourth. Knights, Jarla, Pilu, and Chinoise rounded out the top 8. And some notable top 16 players. We had Vins, Casey, and Fino all made the top 16, but did not make it any further. That was a fun tournament to watch. And then the Hearthstone Collegiate Champs, as part of TESPA, took place this weekend. Penn State Blue took the finals over UCLA Blue. The Stanford Cards and CMU LPE rounded out the top 4. It's a lot of tournaments, so we're going to talk about them each. And the collegiate format was actually really fun. It's like the Hearthstone Invitational format, where you have 3 different players, and they each play 3 pre-selected decks. They have 3 classes, and if 2 of their classes get eliminated, they have to leave the stage. And the winning players get to keep talking, but if you lose twice as a player, then you have to leave the stage and you can no longer help. So it's kind of a brain drain format sort of thing. Fun to watch. Dr. Jickaninky actually commented he was the lead caster on this one, and it was pretty well done, especially for his first time anchoring. So, for tournament meta, keep in mind, all of this is pre-nerf, and so it's going to be largely irrelevant, but it's still interesting to think about, and kind of paints as to why nerfs had to happen, especially with the HCT APAC meta. The top 8 was 8 Warlocks, 4 Cubes, and 4 Control, 8 Paladins, all 8 were Even Paladin, 5 Druids, all 5 were Spiteful Druid, 5 Rogues, 3 Quests, and 2 Odds, 3 Priests, all were Mind Blast, 2 Even Shamans, and a Baku Control Warrior. The tournament was not very diverse because there were 68 paladins brought, and every single one of them were even paladins. That was out of 71 players. 68 out of 71 players brought the same archetype. 48 druids were...
gross.
Yeah, right? 48 druids were brought. Every single one was spiteful. If you brought a druid...
There was no taunt?
No taunt, no token, no mid-range, no nothing, just spiteful.
Jeez.
And then there were 59 warlocks, 40 were cube, 19 were control. Just to give you an idea, that's why nerfs needed to happen, or at least an indicator of why nerfs needed to happen. Now, it got a little bit more interesting at Last Hero Standing, but remember, Last Hero Standing is a super different format, and I want to make sure that we're clear on the deck construction philosophy and the lineup construction philosophy is super different. With Conquest, you have to win with each deck, and you don't know what you're going to be playing against, and each one has to be more capable, so you either pick one particular kind of archetype to bully, which you can kind of get away with sometimes. If you pick an archetype of like Tempo Mage and Q Block and Quest Rogue, which is like what Appa used to win the Brotherly Brawl, then you can say, hey, I'm going to beat control every time, but then you bring aggro decks and you lose. So a lot of times in Conquest, you just bring a more even lineup that has the better decks in the format that can perform against a variety of decks. With Last Hero Standing, you need to be much more targeted because you know what your opponent's queuing up if you lose. If they bring Even Paladin and beat you game one, they have to keep playing Even Paladin, and you can queue up something else. You can queue up something that beats Even Paladin. Well, nothing really beat Even Paladin, that was the problem, but you can queue up like Control Warrior, for example. And then when your Control Warrior stays up, they can queue up Quest Rogue. It goes back and forth, and so the matchups and the decks tend to be a lot more polarized. So you'll notice, even though it's supposed to be more polarized, a lot of these decks are similar, but keep an eye on Rogue. That's where you'll see the biggest difference. So for Paladins, there were 16 Paladins in the top 16. 15 were even, 1 was Murloc. 15 Warlocks, 9 were Cube, 6 were Control. 11 Rogues, 9 Quest Rogues, 2 Odd Rogues. Now I'll point out that Quest Rogue in particular is a really great Last Hero Standing deck, because whenever your opponent plays something slow, you just Quest Rogue it up and you hit them. Easy enough. There were 8 Tempo Mages. They were the only mages in the top 16. 7 Druids, 6 were Spiteful, 1 was Token, 4 Mind Blast Priests, a Dead Man's Hand Warrior, and a Baku Warrior, and an Even Shaman. The winner played Even Paladin, Control Warlock, Dead Man's Hand Warrior, and Quest Rogue. You'll see more about that lineup later, especially the Dead Man's Hand Warrior. And that was Maverick's lineup. As far as the collegiate tournament, this was definitely a weirder tournament. It tends to be, I'm not going to say less competitive, but a little bit more off the beaten path. But still tend to align with what we've seen before. There were 8 Warlocks, 5 were Cube, 3 were Control, 5 Druids, all Spiteful, 5 Priests, all Mind Blast, 5 Rogues, 4 Quest, 1 Odd, 4 Paladins, all even. 2 Mages, both were Big Spell Mage, 2 Odd Control Warriors, and an Odd Hunter. A little bit more off the beaten path, and again, the format is a little bit different. It's kind of hard to get a read on this invitational format. It's definitely different from what we're used to seeing. But Lich King was the most popular legendary overall. Faceless Manipulator was the most popular epic. That's seeing a little bit of play in Control Warrior and occasionally even Control Priest builds. But Penn Blue, the winning team, did play a pretty standard lineup of Spiteful Druid, Q-Block, Quest Rogue, and Mind Blast Priest. So that was pretty much what we saw in any kind of tournament format before the nerfs. Before I get into the games to watch, did either of you fine gentlemen get a chance to watch any of these 3 tournaments?
No, I didn't really watch any of these. Not because, I wasn't really interested, but because I knew, it's just going to be an old meta in a week. So I didn't really worry about it. But from what I hear from these games to watch, it seems like I missed out on some sweet ones.
Yeah, I do remember putting on some of the tournaments, but I couldn't tell you what games I watched because I was likely laddering while it was kind of off to the side. So, yeah, kind of like Appa said, I'm more interested in what people are going to be doing for Last Hero Standing coming up, since I'll be going to Austin, which is going to be Last Hero Standing.
Well, I'm curious what they'll be doing for Last Hero Standing coming up. Might I recommend you have Appa craft you a lineup? He's good at that sort of thing. Now, as far as the games to watch, so I'm going to start with Dreamhack Tours, even though the HCT tournament was probably the most important one in terms of global standing at the end of the year. The Dreamhack Tours tournament was kind of defined by the amount of camera time that Maverick and his Dead Man's Hand warriors spent in front of that camera. And Cora and Derek Brown were casting this, and I did feel a little bad for them, because I don't know how much you listeners know about Dead Man's Hand warrior. The goal of the deck is so that your hand is 2 Dead Man's Hand, a bunch of armor gain, and a bunch of removal. Usually Bring It On, 1 or 2 copies, which is the 2-mana spell that you gain 10 armor, and your opponent's hand, all their minions get reduced in cost by 2. So what you do is you Dead Man's Hand your other Dead Man's Hand back into the deck, along with a bunch of armor gain, and then you gain a bunch of armor, and then you keep drawing through your deck. In Maverick's case, he used Battle Rage to actually keep his draw engine going, along with Fireflies and the Garrosh Hero Power, which was super cool. And then you get that second Dead Man's Hand back, and then you cast it again, and shuffle it right back in the deck. And then you draw a bunch more cards, and gain a bunch more armor, and kill a bunch more stuff, and then you shuffle it back in the deck. See if you can follow me here. This is an infinite loop. So the goal is kill everything your opponent ever does, and then they die to fatigue. So the games take a while. Take a long time. And there were a couple games in particular where Cora and Derek were both literally begging the other person to concede. It was entertaining. I did feel a little bad for them. But in the top 16, Maverick versus Tomas, Tomas had a super aggressive lineup. And Dead Man's Hand Warrior is pretty good about controlling the early game, but if you have a consistent, wide amount of pressure and you're able to refill after a brawl or two, or after a warpath or two, then it can be difficult for them to stabilize. And in this particular case, Maverick was under a lot of pressure from Tomas's Murloc Paladin. He stabilized at 1 life more than once in this game. It came down to, I think, slightly less than a 50-50 brawl a couple of times. And right when we thought the game was over for Tomas, he drew Divine Favor and drew 7 cards. Ugh. Divine Favor. Terrible. But it made this game fun to watch, and the top deck kept the game interesting, and there were so many tight plays from both parties, and Maverick navigated it really, really nicely. It was his tournament to win, and you could see that from all the different games he played. Fibonacci tweeted at him and said, "Maverick, take the wheel." But this was definitely his tournament. He deserved it, and this game in particular kind of showcased it all. Now, at HCT APAC, we had Tansoku versus XiaoDai in Game 3. This Game 3 was a 26-minute Spiteful Druid Mirror. And I don't know if that sounds fun to watch or nauseating. I would accept both answers. But it was, both players were 1-off lethal twice. And the life total swings went up and down and up and down. And it went to full fatigue for both players. It was really awesome to watch kind of how they managed the board state and went back and forth. It was pretty complicated how they had to manage it because, both decks have no spells, so they have to use their minions that act as spells, and it was all this game of board management, life total management, and really leaning on Malfurion a lot, because Malfurion as a Death Knight is basically the closest thing you have to a recurring spell in that matchup. A lot of swings. It looked like both players were going to win at some point throughout the game. I definitely recommend watching it. And speaking of mirrors with big swing turns, let's talk about the Collegiate Cup, the championship there. The actual final match, Penn State versus UCLA, Game 2. It is a best of 11 series, whichever the first team to 6 wins. This was Game 2. It was a Q-block mirror. So both teams were full 3-on-3 with discussion. And in the finals, a Q-block mirror was where we got to see the pendulum swing back and forth. Penn kind of had the early pressure. By early, I mean like turn 10. It had early pressure. UCLA swung back and managed to get Penn on the ropes, managed to get them down to 7 life, and then Penn gained their life back and started pumping the Rin Seals and really reestablishing themselves on the board. Even though their cooldown was in the bottom 8 cards of the deck, Penn Blue was able to hold on and get there, even though their life total was under a lot of pressure. So it was good play from both teams, but I would definitely recommend checking it out to kind of see the really narrow lines of play that had to be followed tightly for Penn to win. And coming soon, well, we've got the Titanar Invitational. Botticus, what do you know about that?
So this is going to be a last hero standing tournament in China this weekend. I put this in here because I saw Orange tweet about it, and he said he had to submit his lineups before they even got a chance to play with the Nerfs. So this is going to be the tournament I'm watching this weekend a lot to see who got it right, and who was able to make the best predictions. I believe also I think Zixo is playing in it as well, but it kind of will lead into the next weekend, which will be a tournament I'm playing in. So I'm interested to see it. And also, I thought there was a hilarious tweet where somebody said, why did you put Zola in your big spell mage deck? What are you looking to copy with it? And Orange replied, I have no idea, I panicked.
Oh, man. I guess you copy Alana if they don't kill it? Copy a water elemental?
Yeah, or Arcane Artificer, I would assume is the best choice. But I thought that was a funny exchange. So,
audio listeners, you couldn't see it, but Appa nearly died. There was a good chance of him choking to death on whatever he was drinking from the spit take that happened there. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun, and that'll kind of hold us over until DreamHack Austin the week after, which will be the first major tournament post-nerf, and that is the one where we'll really see the format kind of start to solidify. Usually it takes about 2 weeks for things to get underway, and then at a tournament like that where everyone is going to be working so hard basically from now until lineup deadline, I imagine that we'll see some pretty significant ladder contenders make their way there. Though remember, you can't always take your DreamHack decks and bring them on a ladder. They're usually tweaked pretty significantly. When Shocky won DreamHack a few years back with Justicar Control Paladin, people tried to play that in the ladder, and it did not do well.
That seems like a good last hero standing deck where you're just like, this loses to a lot of things, but it definitely beats some things, like really significantly.
Yeah, I think he had 3 Justicar decks, or at least 2. I know he had Warrior and Paladin.
He had Zoo.
Yes.
He had Justicar Control Warrior, Justicar Priest with N'Zoth in it, and Justicar N'Zoth Paladin. I remember because that was the first tournament I ever went to, and I was just watching that. I'm like, Shocky plays aggro. This is weird. This feels wrong.
Yeah. Well, that was where he kind of bucked the trend as an aggro player until he zooed Terrence in the face and killed him on like turn 6.
What were you N'Zothing in Priest?
The 4/3s. The 4 mana 4/3.
Okay.
And then Cairn and
Sylvanas.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
And also whatever you got off Museum Curator and whatever you entombed with Death Rattle.
Yeah.
So they're
Tyrion.
Sylvanas.
Yeah. Yeah, that was back in the good old days, but we're reminiscing here. That's my tournament section, and we've actually got some reviews this week. So we'll take turns reading these, but I'm gonna kick the first one over to Appa after this bumper.
Whoa, you're the most heavy metal thing I've ever seen!
All right, so first up, we have a review from Totino's Pizza.
Oh man, I love them too.
I love this username. And the title is Excellent Podcast for Prospective Competitive Players. And it says, I've been playing Hearthstone off and on for about 3 years, with only recently getting into serious laddering. This podcast has helped me get into the headspace of playing competitively, as well as providing tons of useful information, all while being truly great people. Whether you're a new player or simply looking to get back into the swing of competitive Hearthstone, this is by far the best podcast to start with, in my honest opinion. Well, thank you, Totina's Pizza, for your delicious treats and your wonderful review.
Pizza. Thank you, Totinos, for everything you've done for me and for that review. Bot, why don't you take the next one?
All right, so this one is from RedWaller33, which I believe is the host of The Rundown,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Which is the UHL podcast and a good listen. The title is Longtime Listener, Great Show. And it says, not sure how I haven't dropped a review yet, but this is a great cast if you are looking to transition into more serious Hearthstone play. The hosts go deep into how and why decks and cards work, and Hat is one of the most analytical, non-professional hosts I have come across. Botticus and Appa round things out really nicely, and you wouldn't know this was live show recording, except by how I'm reading this review, from how smooth the sound is. If you want to take steps to get serious about the game and play at a higher level, this is for you. Really appreciate that, Red Waller from a fellow podcaster. It means a lot.
I have to agree with him. Hat is one of the most analytical, non-professional players. Like every time I have a tournament or something, or like I need advice, I'm like, Hat, tell me why I'm an idiot or why I'm a genius. And then if I need help, like with something, like I think Hat's helped me prepare for like every single tournament I've played in, and he just does it for fun.
To be fair, you asked me to play the worst matchups, and Appa, I love you, but it's really fun to smash your face in repeatedly. Really fun.
I need to learn how to play them. I need to learn my outs.
Yeah, and thank you for that.
It's not fun, but it's like washing the dishes. You gotta do it.
I have fun. I enjoy it. and thank you, Red Waller. I agree with you on the non-professional part. I really take pride in my non-professionalism, especially in the raw patron cuts. Those of you that aren't listening to them, you'll definitely hear they get a little blue, but that's okay. Appa, because I don't want you to segue into your section by starting with a review, why don't you read this next one? I'll take the last one.
So it says, insightful and fun podcast by Run, he said. You're failing yourself if you don't listen to this Hearthstone podcast. Great discussion on Hearthstone. Founded not only... there we go. Founded not only on the expertise of passionate and skilled podcasters, but also in-depth data founded from around the community. Do yourself a favor and subscribe now.
Thanks, Ron. And then I'll get this last one. Wish to congratulate the casters. Oh, this is from Banyapet. I wish to congratulate the casters for this amazingly informative and entertaining show. Listening to other podcasts as well, other favorites are Value Town and Top Deck Kings. This one is easily the most complete and fun conversation on the game, covering meta, tournaments, ladder, in a way digestible for the casual player, while giving tons of info for the more competitive people. Keep up the great work. Thanks for Peter from Hungary. Peter, thank you so much for listening all the way over there in Hungary. And yeah, you listed some great podcasts there. Value Town and Top Deck Kings are also well respected in our group. Thank you everyone for putting your reviews in. We're going to enter all 4 of these folks into a raffle for a free coaching session for the month. Again, if you submit a review, we'll put you in a raffle. If you win, you get a coaching session. We do it every month. So more reviews help other people find the show. We really appreciate the time you take to share them with us. All right. Decksplanations. Let me get my trumpets ready. And...
So this week we wanted to go over the winners of the post-nerf environment, or what appear to be the winners after the literal first day of playing with the nerfs. So I went ahead and I put a bunch of decks that we think are probably going to be better now. Now that Quest Rogue isn't as good, Spiteful isn't as good, Warlock isn't as good, and you don't have to play against Even Paladin anymore because that deck is axed. So I wanted to preface this by saying all of this is subject to change and it's in flux currently. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what's gotten stronger with this last round of nerfs. And first up, I have Taunt Druid, which might look kind of weird, but Taunt Druid is a very, very powerful deck, and it's honestly one of the best late game decks besides or best late game control decks aside from Dead Man's Hand Warrior, really. Because the way it works is you play Hadronux, you naturalize it, you get all your taunts back, and then you have Witching Hours, another naturalize, and then you have 2 cubes. So you can get up to 7 Hadronuxes in the end game, which is just so much value that most decks can't deal with. And the reason we actually saw a resurgence of Spiteful Druid and Quest Rogue was to farm Taunt Druid, because it had horrendous matchups against both of those decks. So Quest Rogue and Spiteful Druid actually served the previous meta to keep Taunt Druid in check. And now that they're gone, Taunt Druid looks like it might have a place in the metagame again, especially if people aren't playing cards like Hex, Polymorph, or some people were even starting to play like Tinkmaster over Spark in their control decks before it kind of faded away. And I know the even warriors and just like pure quest warriors started including Cornered Sentry to give 3 beasts for Witching Hour to hit.
It was a common pick off of Stonehill Defender in that specific matchup, because it felt like a lot of the quest warriors or just like warriors with taunts in them were odd, but you would see Cornered Sentries picked a reasonable amount because there's not a lot of taunt warrior specific minions, so you would actually see it a reasonable amount of the time.
Yeah, I think the takeaway from this is that don't underestimate Taunt Druid, because it was literally such a powerful deck that it warped the metagame around it, in that, or at least the tournament metagame, in that people brought Quest Rogue and Spiteful Druid to say, you can't bring Taunt Druid ever, or I'm going to smash you with these. So I think we should watch out for that. And then Token Druid is a deck that's hasn't seen as much play as Taunt or Spiteful, but it's a deck that got popular with Muzzy taking a variation of it to Legend last month, I think, or maybe earlier this month.
He also made top 8 of the HCT with it.
Yeah, and he brought it to HCT Americas, and it's a powerful deck, but it was pretty weak to the board clears of Warlock, which is why they played, what's the card? Soul of the Forest? Is that right? The 4 mana? Yeah, they played Soul of the Forest to kind of make themselves a little better against AoE. But even then, Warlock was still pretty decent against it. I'm not sure what its matchups against the other decks were like, but I think it's powerful enough and proactive enough of a strategy to look out for in the first week or 2.
Yeah, it's really good against... I've seen both Taunt Druid and Token Druid actually quite a bit. I've seen them more than I've seen Spiteful Druid. And I got fortunate that I was playing against the Token Druid with Control Warlock, but the plays in that deck are just very, very powerful. And if you're not careful and you let your board get too wide, it's one of those decks, if you don't know how to play against it, it can beat you quite easily. Because if you let their board get really wide with you let your board get wide with a so they can Spreading Plague you and then Soul of the Forest, it's so hard to remove all of their minions, and the amount of damage they can do in a turn is just huge, as we saw when Muzzy OTK'd Dog, when Dog was looked in an unlosable position. So
yeah, if you let yourself get Plague Souled, you're probably getting roared and Branching Path the next turn.
Yeah, well, and Muzzy went roar paths, and that's 6 extra damage per minion. So if you have 7 minions, that's an extra 42 on top of the damage it already does. So it feels more like a combo deck than a mid-range deck, because it actually, if you look at the deck list, they have so few threats. Really, really few threats, and I think that's the difference between that and the Token Druid decks of the past, is that the Token Druid decks of the past, they would run the Violet Teachers and Living Roots, and you would have ways to build small but reasonable boards and always threaten pressure. And then you would also have Wisp of the Old Gods, and you would have Onyxia, and you would make these super wide boards. But this deck has Whispering Woods and Spreading Plague, and then UI and a couple greedy sprites, an Ironwood Golem here and there, but not a lot of minion pressure. It plays Arcane Tyrant, I think.
Yep.
So you're actually really light in terms of threats. It tries to stick one unclearable board, and then if it ever does that, it probably wins. But I was playing this today against Miracle Rogue, and I did a Plague Taunt board, but they had a bunch of spiders already, so they were able to Thalnos Fan and clear both the original spiders and then the 2/2s that popped out. And you might see more Warpaths. Defile can be theoretically pretty good there. There's a lot
of Dreadlord is really good against it too.
I think that it will get refined a little bit more. As it stands right now, I think it's a strong strategy if piloted well and in a metagame open to it, but there's a lot of AoE right now. Not as many equalities, so it makes sense that Taunt Druid is really getting better, and I think that deck was great beforehand. I think it was underrated, and people were just leaving out Ferocious Howl, which is one of the most important cards of the deck against all the Tempo Mage that people were running. But I think that Druid is still probably the biggest winner of the nerfs. I am curious to see which direction Druid goes in, because I could see Token being replaced by kind of a mid-rangey token like Muzzy was playing, where he also had Cairn and Druid of the Claw and a lot of other minions.
Yeah, I definitely think Druid is probably, at least right now, looking like the winner of the set of nerfs. So it's going to be interesting to see how the other classes.
Still good too. Like,
Spiteful
is still quite strong.
is actually pretty good. I was playing Mind Blast Priest yesterday, and I was running into a bunch of Spiteful Druids, and usually that matchup's pretty okay, but I kept getting Malfuried on 7.
Yeah, that card is harder for Mind Blast Priest to beat.
Yeah, but the thing that I noticed, and I actually made a kind of sarcastic tweet about it, was like they were playing Spiteful on 7, maybe not turn 7, but on 7 mana, and it was still, I mean, it's still good. Like the high rolls are still 16 power, 16 power for 7 mana, and the low rolls are 12 power for 7 mana. So like that still might just be good enough to play.
Or 11 power and a bunch of butt.
Yeah, that's true.
I'd be surprised if it completely went away. I just think it'll be a little bit less dominant because it's when everything slows down by a turn, you can sneak under it. Right? We don't have to play Spellbreaker. You don't have to play goofy cards that deal with a single big minion. And the rise of Shaman that we'll talk about later, the Hex returning to the metagame is actually a really healthy safety valve for a lot of the decks we're talking about. In particular, Druid and Hex don't get along, and that's probably good for the health of the metagame, because it's really, really good against Taunt Druid. Really, really, really good. Because it makes a little beast, and then the Witching Hour gets back a frog, and then they concede.
Yeah, or the Hydronox gets back a bunch of frogs.
Yes.
And you don't care about little frogs. You care about big dragons.
Yes.
Dragons are scary.
And Lich Kings.
But also, yes. But it did feel different when I did play against Spiteful Druid when I was playing Shaman, and it might just been because I was playing Shaman, but they went coin Spiteful into Spiteful, and I did not feel like I was in as bad of a situation. Now maybe their draw wasn't as good as like the really good draws, but just the extra turn, as anybody who's had a Doomsayer go off in the mid game, just getting that extra turn is really considerable, like just giving you that much more time. So
yeah, the difference between 6 and 7 for Priest at least is that even if they coin Spiteful, you can still answer it on pace with Psychic Scream. Whereas before you had to like wait 2 turns, then you got smashed for like 30 or something.
Yeah.
But this way, like even if they coin it out, you're still untapping and you're on 7 while they're still on 6, but they coined so they got to 7, so you still have your Psychic Scream mana. So that's
or you're a turn away from Anduin too. Like
yeah,
it's just better.
So I think it impacts a lot of matchups that I had as good matchups, like negatively. I know against Tempo Mage, I played a lot of Spiteful leading up to the Brotherly Brawl. Learning the Tempo Mage matchup, it came down a lot to you sticking a Spiteful and then killing them the next turn with it before they killed you. Like there was a 1-turn window really, usually whenever I was playing it, that like you stuck Spiteful and then you had to kill them the next turn or you were dead. So like pushing that back a turn means like you're probably gonna have to like change the deck or something, or like add healing or something like that to be able to make the Tempo Mage matchup better.
Yeah, one of the techs I heard people talking about actually before the nerfs even happened was, I believe, Nerubian Unraveler. Because obviously you only play one spell in your deck, so it's on average going to be much better for you than it is for your opponent, or much worse for your opponents than it is for you. And now that you don't really have a six drop in that slot, it kind of slots right in to curve out nicely into the Spiteful.
Yeah, you think of 6 drops and usually like you think of Cairn as like a curve filler, but Unraveler does seem pretty solid there. Like you stick it on 6 against a control deck and they have to deal with that with like the increased mana cost, and then if they can't, if you stick a Spiteful behind it against control, it's kind of like sticking a threat against taunt, or behind a taunt against aggro.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that same thing where you have to deal with this and then that, and then your stuff costs you more. So that seems really interesting. I want to actually try a build with that after the podcast. The next deck we have is Spell Hunter, and excuse me. Spell Hunter kind of fell out of popularity when Barnes and Yashiraz rotated, but it has seen more tournament play than ladder play. I would wager, but it's been a tournament deck for a little bit because it's solid against aggro, because it has secrets like Explosive Trap, Wandering Monster, cards like Flanking Strike and Deathstalker Rexar. Like these are all really good against aggro. And then after you like clear their board or manage it, then you play 5 mana 12/12 with the Spellstone. You play 5 mana, get 4 beasts, and then you kill them in 2 turns. And then it's also reasonable against control decks that aren't like Q-Block or Taunt Druid, because Rexar is like a 1-card game plan against them. Like you land a Rexar, and then you just have unlimited value pretty much. It's really hard for control decks to kind of keep up with that, because realistically they need to kill you before you just like play too many dudes, because there's just so many threats that they have to answer at that point. And then it's probably hardest matchup I'd argue would be Quest Rogue, and that's either gone or less popular. So I feel like Spell Hunter probably got a bit better.
Yeah, usually the way you lost as Quest Rogue against them was they played Animal Companion and into like a Spellstone, and they just had too many threats, and you might have had like a slow hand. That's generally how I lost to Spell Hunter, but it felt like a pretty good matchup before. I did want to say with this deck, you don't always have to attack your opponent. If you are playing a control deck with like a good amount of taunts in it, and you're playing again, like, and you can determine that your late game will likely beat the hunter late game, just don't attack them if they have a secret up.
Yeah,
like,
I was playing Druid, and I had like I played Druid against them a bit, and Spiteful Druid, and I've had like slow starts, and they just secret onto, and I just click the hero power, I don't attack them, and I end the turn.
Because or even if you have like minions, like the best part is to just save all your minions, because eventually they're going to play a Spellstone, and then you can trade all your minions into their minions, and then the Spellstone doesn't do anything unless it's like Freezing Trap. And it's just, I see it happen so often that people attack into Explosive Trap or Wandering Monster when they just don't need to.
Yeah, like you can leave their secret up and it's fine. Like they'll get a little bit of Eaglehorn value off of it, but that's not really what's gonna like ruin a game for you. What'll ruin a game is attacking a Firefly into a Wandering Monster, them getting like a 3/4, and then you just lost the board to this 3/3 on turn 2.
Yeah, Wandering Monster is the main reason not to attack. I would make the argument that if you're looking to be Explosive Trap or Freezing Trap, you probably do attack because you want to play into the smaller board, but Wandering Monster punishes that exact behavior, and attacking on 2 is usually good to get out of the way of the Eaglehorn Bow getting buffed, because then you're basically saving yourself 3 extra life, but Wandering Monsters kind of change the game there, in that if you attack early, you will lose the board right away, and that's devastating, like absolutely devastating. Now, later in the game, when you can value trade, and then your one last minion swings in the Explosive Trap, then of course you're happy. And if it happens to be a Wandering Monster, like whatever, but on turn 2, I think it's generally right. I agree with both these guys that attacking usually doesn't make sense.
Or the best is when they have either Explosive Trap or Wandering Monster up, and you're going to play an AoE for the turn, so you attack them with your minion, it procs the Wandering Monster, and then you can AoE generally like all of their 3/3s that they played a Spellstone with, and whatever came out of the Wandering Monster.
Yeah, I've done that exact play a lot with Mind Blast Priest. I've just held up their secret and just let them stay there, and then I would like play a Northshire like the turn before they Spellstone, and then they go Spellstone, make 4 wolves, and then I attack, and then Dustbreaker, and then it's just like a full clear. Like, yeah. I've traded 2 cards for their 2 cards, or no, I've traded a card for their 2 cards at that point.
Yeah, there's just like there's so many situations where I see people attacking into Hunter's secrets where it's just like, you can just wait. Like, the fact that they played their secret, and if you don't attack them, they get no value out of it until you decide that they get their value out of it, is just very powerful. And like, you get to make the choice, but it's harder it's easier when you're doing that with like a control deck. Like, obviously, like Warlock is good against it, or Priest with like Dustbreakers where you have the AoEs, whereas it's a little different when you're playing a more aggressive deck, because you sometimes need to like get the secret out of the way so you can start pushing damage with other stuff too. So
yeah, and also if you're playing this deck, there's something that I see far too many people do. Like, even in Legend and like higher up the ladder, people do this. They'll just equip Eaglehorn Bow and just send it to the face. They just like use a charge and it's just like at the face. Like, I feel like I play against more people that do that than not, and most of the time it's just wrong. It's just 3 mana, 3 damage to the face, where like that can be used to trade into an extra minion to make the Eaglehorn a 2-for-1 later on in the game.
Yeah, in general, Spell Hunter is not necessarily an aggressive deck in a lot of matchups, and you should be using your spells for value at a lot of points. And then sometimes you end up bursting your opponent. That does happen, but a lot of times Spell Hunter is like a very mid-rangey deck where you want to get the most value out of your cards that you can.
It's a weird mid-rangey kind of deck in that it has significant single threats, but its biggest threat is like the hero power and value over time. And then it just kind of it's almost like a token hunter more than anything. Like, because you still lean on early to mid-game minions, you just don't play any of them, you just roll them.
I think it's actually one of the better decks in the game for switching roles like immediately. Like, you can control the game, control the game.
Really does that well.
Yeah, you can control the game early, and then like you can Spellstone, and then you're presenting a ton of power, or you like Rexar, and then the game's just like completely switched.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next deck we have here is Big Spell Mage, and this has been around for quite a while, but with Spiteful Druid, Q Block, and Quest Rogue going away, it probably gets better. Polymorph is important. Will probably be important in this upcoming metagame, I would guess. Like we said with Taunt Druid, like because Polymorph makes a beast, and that makes Witching Hour worse if it pulls it back. And then all the AoEs that they have are fantastic against the Odd Paladins and the Murloc Paladins, and not having to worry about Call to Arms refills on 4 or like later on in the game is just really nice.
Yeah, the scariest deck for this deck is the next deck that we'll talk about.
Yeah, the next
Yeah.
one is Tempo Mage. It's still very, very powerful, and it actually loses two of its really good matchups. I'm talking about these like the decks aren't going to exist at all, but they get a lot less popular. So two of its really great matchups were Quest Rogue and just the slow Warlock decks, but it struggled a bit versus Spiteful and Even Paladin. So they kind of cancel each other out in that sense. It's like loses two good matchups, but loses two bad matchups. So, I mean, Tempo Mage is it's just a very powerful strategy. Like, if it punishes your opponent for stumbling really well, and I I always like looking at it as if you had a bad matchup with Tempo Mage and you drew Mana Worm, it's no longer a bad matchup.
Yeah. that's how
Yeah.
how it honestly feels. It's just like, well, my matchup feels really good against this, and my hand is really good unless they play Mana Worm on turn 1, and then of course they full mulligan their hand, and then they play Mana Worm on turn 1.
Yeah, there's
And
a lot of like hands out there, like where you keep a hand and you're like, this is great against Tempo Mage, and then you're just cold to a Mana Worm.
yeah, you like play your 3/3 on turn 3, and they frostbolt it, and they have the Mana Worm in play, and you're just dead.
It's Tempo Mage. Honestly, the more I play Miracle Rogue and the more I play Tempo Mage, the decks are pretty similar in terms of the kind of low minion count and the high density of just pressure over a very contracted period of time, very short period of time where they just apply a lot of pressure. But Tempo Mage is definitely better when at not playing on the board, but it can doing damage from hand. It has a lot of reach. And really, where I think Tempo Mage shines is turn 3, turn 4, they control the game by not responding to what you do, but preventing you from doing it. And you know this feeling. If they've gone Kirin Tor on 3, and then you coin and nothing happens, and then you lose. Like,
Yep.
it's when you test for the secret, but the coin, you actually needed that to get on board against them, and then the minion that you play, now that you've spent the coin, dies immediately to runes, and then they play another secret next turn, and it's the actual counterspell. Just being able to stop you from doing what you need to do, and there's a lot of value in making you check every turn. Taking time to check if it's not what you already wanted to do is really inconvenient and inefficient, and it kind of
So
prevents you from playing the game you want to play.
so I think I've actually leveled up my game against Tempo Mage quite a bit. Um, I always used to be a lot more scared to play against them than I am now, and I think that just comes with playing the deck a lot more. But a lot of times, if they Kirin Tor on 3 and I started on the coin, a lot of the times I'll just run a spell out there because I give my opponent the respect to not play a counter spell into a coin. And if you coin and it's explosive runes, then you no longer have the coin for the counter spell. So there is a little bit of leveling and mind games going there, but I usually put my opponent at good enough to realize that if they play counterspell and I coin, then they lose the counterspell for no value. So I usually put them on holding.
It really also depends, like, especially if you're playing at a relatively like high level, and they play a secret that they did not get off Arcanologist. Like, it's a lot more telling if they like get the secret off Arcanologist, and then play that one, that you have a little bit less information about that. But if they just like play a secret in their hand, especially if they've already played an Arcanologist, then you know that they're trying to they're doing something specific, like, because you know that they could have played the one that they got off Arcanologist.
Yeah, there's actually a ton of edge to be gained there against Tempo Mage with Arcanologist, but it requires a lot of hand tracking. But if you can hand track properly, you can get a lot of information on what's in their hand. So those are the two mage decks. Tempo Mage is kind of on here because Mana Worm starts are really busted, and it's just a good deck. Next up, we have the Paladin decks, which I think I would argue would be the class that's most in flux right now, because the other ones all had like pretty known quantities and other like solid decks that you could play other than like the main deck, but even Paladin was just so much better than the other two that you never really saw these. And these are odd Paladin, Murloc Paladin, and they were playing second and third fiddle to even Paladin. But now that Call to Arms isn't there to carry even Paladin, odd Paladin looks to be stepping up, at least right now, to take its place. I think Murloc Paladin is still really powerful, and it has very powerful snowballing starts that you can just lose to 1, 2, 3. But I think what's worth noting is Murloc Paladin might still want to just play Call to Arms, because it's not hitting just 1-drops with it. And I think Call to Arms at 5 mana is still okay in that deck. But I haven't played with it, so I could be completely wrong. But my initial impression is like, I paid 4 for Call to Arms. I'd probably pay up to 6 for that. So I think 5 in Murloc Paladin will still be okay.
Yeah.
I've also... Go ahead, Hat.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it'd be interesting to also see maybe like a Valley Pally deck. I know Cream Puff was talking about it, and Call to Arms still makes a lot of sense in there. But I've actually played against mostly the Paladins I've played against are mostly odd Paladin. And if you're not playing the right deck, that hero power just gets out of hand really fast, and it's so hard to keep up with it. It feels almost impossible to keep up with it. If you only have like one AoE, they just refill so fast.
Yeah, I think Murloc Paladin makes the most sense for the Call to Arms nerf, because they want a Megasaur on 4 anyways, right? Every good curve with that deck, you plop a Megasaur down on 4 or a Blessing of Kings if you have the board. So Call to Arms as a refill is totally reasonable, but when you're using it as what it was before was your entire offensive strategy, that it was better to remove every 1-drop from your deck and every 3-drop and every 5-drop and every 7-drop, because Call to Arms was guaranteed 6 mana. And so now in Murloc Paladin, it's going to be more fair. You're going to hit some 1s sometimes, and it's going to be okay. And you're going to hit some 2-mana 2/3s, and it's going to be okay. But it's still going to be a powerful refill that draws you cards and gains you mana. It's just not going to be as consistently busted as it was before. And I agree that Odd Paladin, I played it today, and I was playing against a Druid, and they did not have Spreading Plague on 6, and I won real quick. Real quick. Because they cleared my board they swiped my face and killed 6 things, and the next turn I had 5 things on the board. Like, just lost in the jungle, hero power, and play a minion, and you're back there, and then I leveled up the next turn, they died. So, the deck is just this constant, inexorable pressure that you can deal with by, once you get on the board against them, and you have more minions than they can generate in a turn, then the game is over, right?
Yeah.
But if they can maintain board parity with you, or get ahead of you, and you're just trying to be defensive with spells, it's very difficult to keep up.
It's very hard to fight for board with them in the early turns, because they'll usually play a solid, like very efficient 1-drop, like Argent Squire, Dire Mole, or Righteous Protector, and then that'll make your 1-drop, if you have it, it'll make its life awkward. And then after that, they go 2 1-drops, and then you might have even not had a 1-drop, and then you play 2-drop, and then they can go like play a weapon or something, and then they just have like complete control over the board from that point. To beat them, you really need like a mid-game swing into a threat to dictate how the game goes from there. But if you let them do their thing, you'll get run over really quickly.
Yep, their button is that hero power is really, really powerful when upgraded, and probably the best proactive upgraded one in the game. I think the Rogue Dagger is seeing a lot of play as upgraded, because the Rogue cards are better. But in terms of just the hero power, that Paladin hero power just feels like a tidal wave that you can't really escape from.
Yeah. So I think those are the 2 Paladin decks that we'll probably see more of. I don't think we'll see even Paladin anymore. Like, the deck's still a fine, like reasonably efficient mid-range deck, but losing Call to Arms is like really, really massive.
Yep. I agree.
So next up, we have Priest, and the only Priest deck I have on here is Mind Blast Priest. I haven't played any with Combo Priest since rotation, so I don't really know how that goes.
I think Quest Priest is probably more popular than Combo Priest right now.
Yeah. I have seen a bit of Quest Priest, but I think Mind Blast Priest, it's been a known quantity for a while. I mean, it was in most tournament lineups for the past month, really. And I know a lot of people, a lot of pros on Twitter were saying this would like be their pick for like one of the best decks after the nerfs. And I think it's definitely really strong and holding its own and contending for that title. But it does have some weaknesses because Taunt Druid gets a lot better. The Control Warrior decks get a lot better too because you don't have to worry about Taunt Druid or Quest Rogue. So it has, I think it's going to have more common bad matchups than it did, like more frequent bad matchups than it did, as opposed to having like the one polarized bad matchup. It'll have like a few here and there that are a little harder.
Well, and control decks just take longer to get right. This is a new meta, and we're talking about Hunter being better, even Shaman being better, and Tempo Mage improving. These are all things that happen at the beginning of the expansion. Miracle Rogue as well. Every single set, you will see Miracle Rogue perform day one, and then usually fall out of favor, except for like 3 people for the next week or so, unless they print Small Time Buccaneer. In which case, Miracle Rogue stays good. But they don't do that anymore. They did that once. And if you look at the win rate chart in HS Replay right now, again, limited sample size, not to be taken as gospel, but you look at the HS Replay class win rates right now, Druid is number 1, Shaman's number 2, and Priest is dead last. And right above Priest is Warlock. Right? Kind of an interesting flip, but notice that the bottom 3 classes here, Warrior, Warlock, and Priest, are the control classes. Control decks, you have to figure out what you're fighting against before you can construct an effective deck. And that's just common with any new meta. The control decks come later, and we can see Big Spell Mage will get better once the meta is more refined. Control Warrior will get better when the meta is more defined. There's probably some variant of Control Warlock besides the deck we're about to talk about that will still be fine. But right now the threats are too diverse, and so you can't put efficient answers in.
Yeah, and the next deck up that we're talking about is Even Warlock. And I put this in here because people experimented with Even Warlock a bit when the expansion first came out, but it got abandoned pretty quickly because Control Warlock and Q Block were just more powerful. They were just better at doing what Even Warlock was trying to do. But now that the decks are a little slower, Q Block and Control Lock are a little slower, people are experimenting with Even Warlock again. This is a deck has the same general like slow Warlock game plan, but it plays cards like Twilight Drake and Mountain Giant. And I saw one earlier with Sun Fury Protector, which was sweet. And that reminded me of super old like Ancient Watcher Handlock. It's a very grindy Warlock deck, and the 1-mana hero power helps them smooth out their draws a lot.
Yep, and play turn 3 Mountain Giants on the coin. It's...
I think, you can't do it on the play in this deck?
You start with 4 cards, you drop to 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, you have 9 cards in hand when you start turn 4. Or start turn 3, right?
So no,
that's 4 mana.
Okay.
Yeah, it's barely, but you miss it. On the coin, you can do it. It feels way more like a mid-range deck. It doesn't feel like a control deck because you're so much heavier on minions. And you don't have Void Lord, which sucks. But you can play Lack if you really want to, but you can't get Void Lord or Doomguard or Despicable Dreadlord, so what's the point? The Gul'dans are a lot more fair. They get back Vulgar Homunculus and Dread Infernal, and Hooked Reavers is 4/4s. Well, but it's 4/4s.
Yeah, so I will say I played against this deck just before the cast today, and it can put a lot of power in play real fast.
Yeah, it really does remind me a lot of old school Handlock. Like they would clear, then they would tap and tap, and then they would slam Mountain Giant, Twilight Drake, and then you're just facing 12.
Yeah. like I nethered a board that had around 16 power on it, and the next turn they played Mountain Giant, Hooked Reaver, and a plated beetle, and the Hooked Reaver was turned on, and it was just like I didn't get rid of any power. All the power's back on the board, and they still have 7 cards in hand. They have like so much stuff.
You cleared, and that dude looked you in the eyes and said, "Now do it again."
Yeah.
And I died very, very fast. So the Hooked Reaver, a card I was not very high on couple sets ago when it first came out, but in this deck it seems quite good, especially since you can get your health total down so quickly, and it's just a lot of power if you can do that. I actually would be very cognizant of your opponent's life total, and it might even be correct in certain situations to heal your opponent to prevent them from being able to like tap into a Hooked Reaver.
Is it 2014? Like, you didn't say Molten Giant, you said Hooked Reaver, but if you had said Molten Giant, it would be 2014 right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, yeah.
I really like the plated beetles in the deck too, because they gain you the 3 life, but also like don't interfere with your Hooked Reavers later in the game, which is nice. Which actually came up earlier today. My opponent was at 17, but his Reavers came down to 7/7s.
Yep, happened to me too.
That card's like the little engine that's kind of fit its way into almost every deck in some way. Like, it was in Even Paladin, it was in Control Warlock, and that's how you know a card's really good. It's just kind of versatile, and it's a beast, so you can Houndmaster it if you want to. It's got a lot going for it. I'm glad that card's in play.
Like the body is efficient enough, like 2-mana 2/3 is efficient enough to like be run, even if the effect's like fairly marginal. But I think it just has applications across enough decks where it can come down as like a threat early or as a defensive like roadblock that they have to get through. So I think I really like cards like that. Like Mistress of Mixtures 2 was one of those where it's just like a versatile anti-aggro tool that like also has applications elsewhere. But yeah, I like Plated Beetle a lot. Also the golden animation's sweet. I need to get golden ones.
Yeah. More like gold-plated beetle, am I right? Okay, I'll mute myself.
So the next 2 decks we have on here are Quest and Control Warrior. And you can play the odd Quest version too, but excuse me. I usually think of like the full Quest with it's running Cornered Sentry in it and Blood Razor and Warpath and that kind of thing, because it's really trying to beat up on aggro, with just having like the Quest as the anti-control game plan. I think the slow warrior decks have had a lot of trouble against Quest Rogue and Spiteful Druid, and they could beat Warlock, but they weren't great against him. But if Mind Blast Priest becomes more popular, the armor gain from the strategy is like game winning on its own. The Whirlwind effects are really, really good against Odd Paladin, and the Quest version with Cornered Sentry is also fairly strong against Token Druid, especially if you're running Tankmaster over Spark in there too, just to rub salt in the wound.
You mean Taunt? You meant Taunt Druid then?
Yeah.
If you're talking about over Spark.
Token?
Because it's good against Token too, because Whirlwind is pretty good against Whispering Woods.
I didn't mean Token, I meant Taunt, but it's also fairly decent against Token Druid too.
Right. Any deck that doesn't go wide, I think is pretty and has some AoEs are like good against the Token Druid. I think if you're a deck that tries to go wide and you get Spreading Plagued, that's how you lose to Taunt Druid or sorry. Now I got it confused. Token Druid.
Speaking of decks that go wide,
so does Phantom Militia count as like a token taunt? Can it be both so that you can both be right? Sure.
All right, well, we were talking about decks that go wide, and Even Shaman is one of those decks.
Yeah.
Do you want to cover this since you wrote this? Also, I'm about to start coughing.
Yes, I do. Even Shaman is... So, Even Shaman, I think, was really underrated in the last meta, and people were starting to talk about it right before the rotation. Terrence M. and Soddle, in particular, were tweeting about it. Stan Sifka said it was going to be the best deck post-rotation. I played it in UHL a couple times, and our buddy Jetlaw did well at the Brotherly Brawl with it, and this was one of the games to watch a couple weeks ago. He fatigued a Control Priest with it. Edelweiss's Control Priest. So the deck has a lot of power and leans pretty heavily into the Hagatha value. And we talked about this last week, but Appa wasn't here, so I'm going to say it again. There's a really big difference between Shaman spells being bad and Shaman spells just being not worth putting in your deck. And there's a world of difference between the two, because they might not be universally applicable in the deck building screen. But boy, when you get that Fork Lightning and they got 2 minions that both need to take 2 damage, it's really good. Or when you get the 3rd Hex, or the 3rd Healing Rain, or the Wind Fury for your Earthen Mighted, Snow Fury Giant, or whatever. There's a lot.
Spirit Echo. Spirit Echo with Hagatha is so good.
The volume of value there is just crazy. So, in addition, you're really proactive. You were the best Flame Tongue Totem deck there's ever been. You were a really good Dire Wolf Alpha deck. And you no longer have to deal with a meta full of Defiles and Godfreys. So, Warlock's lost. Warlock dropping to the next to last class. Again, using HS replay numbers. And Shaman has jumped to next to best class. So while Druid might have the trophy, Shaman's the comeback player here. And is probably the most improved from pre-nerf to post-nerf, because its biggest predator is gone. And if you want to feast on Tempo Mage, you play this deck right here. You go so wide so fast that Tempo Mage can't do anything against you, and you're really not dependent on spells at all. The even effect is really good for proactive hero powers, and in the absence of even Paladin being as good, even Shaman is really, really strong at leaning into the totems and taking advantage of them. I do miss Maelstrom Portal, don't we all? But you do get Mercspark Eel, and Mercspark Eel is just the best little SI7 agent that you could ever see.
Yeah, if you want to beat this deck with not Warlock, I would suggest playing Wild Pyromancers and Psychic Screams.
Yep, or Warpaths, or Dragon Series, or Blizzards. But the deck can go long. It's got Lich King, it's got Hagatha, it's got Alakir, it's got Corpse Takers, you've got Archon Commanders, sometimes Fire Elementals, and often you have Sea Giants. So the deck has a pretty wide variety of threats, not to mention some decent ability to go along. Hagatha, with the volume of minions in this deck, you generate a lot of value. And that's with you trying to be an aggressive deck. We're not even talking about Value Shaman, which Botticus, I'm sure, is dying to tell us about.
Yeah. I find it funny that it says bot talk here, and you just led the discussion for even Shaman, yet we have Appa on the cast, and both of us are the ones talking about Shaman.
You know, I actually haven't played Shaman a ton, like probably in the past 4 months in Standard or something like that, because it hasn't been that good. I played a lot of Shaman whenever I was taking a break from competitive, but I came back into trying to be competitive, and I just haven't played Shaman because it hasn't been top 4 best decks, you know. And that's kind of what I've been playing. So I actually haven't played that much even Shaman or Shudderwalk Shaman. I don't even own Hagatha. That's how blasphemous I'm being right now.
Yeah. You need to open some more packs, because Hagatha is, as Hat has said, one of the most fun card from the new expansion to play with, and I definitely agree. It's so basically the last deck we want to talk about is Shudderwalk Shaman. There's my version, which is very value oriented. So the idea behind the deck is to play a bunch of taunts in the early game, and then kind of basically you have Keleseth in it, and Fireflies, and Stonehill Defenders, and I'm playing a Servant of Kalamos, and you basically just get to the late game and either play Hagatha, and then you never run out of cards for the rest of the game, or you play a Shudderwalk, and it completely refills your hand, and then also generates a really scary board for your opponent. And then every once in a while it does play Zola, so you have the off chance to get another Shudderwalk, but it's really just it's in the deck because you're getting so many cards back with it. And so a lot of the matchups you end up grinding out your opponents. So I found it was quite good against the more aggressive decks, but it struggled against Warlock and the heavier control decks. Warrior, it felt pretty good because you just never ran out of minions and it was really hard for them to clear everything. But like Warlock's hero power was just good at keeping them alive, and it was hard to kind of burst them down. But then there's the combo version. So basically, I was playing the value version because I didn't like cards like Volcano, because I felt like Volcano was hard to develop behind, and then your opponent would develop a board, and it was really hard to get back onto board after that. And it also played Life Drinker, which is not the best. It's just not very well statted, and like it's useful, but a lot of games with like the more combo centric versions is you almost don't deal you never attack your opponent. So like the 3 damage you're doing is not super useful. So I kind of cut all that stuff. I cut Grumble because I'd never wanted to like play Shudderwalk and then have it get all this value and then have it not return the Shudderwalk to my hand and not be able to combo off. So that's why I went with the value version. But obviously, a lot of people recently have been doing well with the combo version, which plays all those cards like Life Drinker and Grumble and Zola, and has been doing really well. I assume because a lot of people have somewhat unrefined lists and can kind of take advantage of going to late game, because if you guarantee the combo, then it's too much damage for your opponents to deal with generally. I felt like most of the lists I saw were cutting the Fire Plume Harbinger and the Murmuring Elemental, but I guess Hat saw Sifka playing it. I'm more of the opinion that I don't want those cards in the deck just because they are like, they're just so, it's so terrible to have to play a 2-mana 1/1 when you can still guarantee the combo without those cards just by playing Zola and then grumbling it back to your hand. So it costs 1 mana, so that even if your Shudderwalk fails to go off, then you can just Zola the Shudderwalk and go again the next turn. So I think both of these decks just got better because the other decks slowed down, and it felt like as long as you could try to maintain board parity, then you would just win the long game with Hagatha. And obviously the combo version just wins the extremely long game because you just deal a ton of damage and gain a bunch of life at some point. And if you're not under a ton of pressure, then the combo version is better. But I like the value version because decks like Tempo Mage, Tar Creeper is like in both of the decks, but is good against Tempo Mage. But going Tar Creeper into the
12-year Stone Shaper.
12-year Stone Shaper, especially if you ever play a 12-year Stone Shaper into an Explosive Runes, it is the greatest feeling in the world, because you take 1 damage and then it removes the Divine Shield, and then they generally have like a Kirin Tor Mage that has to attack into it, or they have to Fireball it, and it just prevents so much damage that I just love it.
It's like 4 mana, destroy your counterspell, get Ascension.
Yeah, it's real good. But it does really suck when you don't draw your elemental before it, and then you're just really sad when you have to play it and it doesn't have taunt. Even it'd be so much better if it just naturally had taunt and then got Divine Shield if you played the elemental, but when you don't get either, it can feel really bad.
I like how I wrote 2 Decksplanation segments for this show. I wrote one on the winners of the post-nerf environment, and then I wrote one on what's the deal with Shaman now? And then we just like fit that one into this one.
Just kind of did a little both. A little column A, a little column B.
Oh, we didn't have an interview, so we had extra time.
Because I posted in the Discord, like in the behind-the-scenes stuff where we do the show, and I was like, hey, I'm writing 2 things. Just pick which one you want or pick which one you like better, and we'll do that. JK, doing both.
Why not Zoidberg?
Why not Zoidberg?
Yeah. And really, Stan Cifka's list, I only saw him playing it a little bit yesterday, but he was going full elemental. He had no Hagatha, but he had Kalimos, he had Hot Spring Elementals, he had Fire Plume Harbingers, Murmuring Elementals, all the elementals that he could fit in there, except for the ones that drew you cards or dealt damage to random targets.
It's also worth noting in the combo version, which it might be why he cut Hagatha too, is that when you are planning on going Fire Pluming your Murmuring to guarantee the combo, if you Murmuring and Shutterwalk, if you've played Hagatha before, there's always a chance that the chain stops immediately, because you can Murmuring your Shutterwalk, and then you create everything, and then there's a chance that Grumble triggers first, Serenite triggers, and then on the next go around, there's a chance that you can go Murmuring Hagatha, and then you just lose both Shutterwalks.
Yep. The list doesn't even play Hagatha. I think for that exact reason. That's
what I'm saying. I think that might be part of the reason why he cut it, because there's a chance that you just get randomly screwed by that. But also, he's just a mid-range deck, so it makes sense too.
Yeah.
Yep. And also, the problem with Hagatha in the combo version is it can be so hard to get rid of spells in your hand. Your hand just fills up very, very quickly, and then there's a chance that you fail to go off with Shutterwalk 2 just because you have too many spells in hand, and if there's not room to put more Shutterwalks in your hand, then you just get spells, and it's no good, no bueno.
Yeah, I think Firefly, if you're looking to go full combo, you probably can't afford to play cards like Firefly or Servant of Kalimosa or Sandbinder or whatever, just because the hand size issues are really significant.
Yeah, I think I like the mid-range version more, just from kind of looking at it and imagining how the games play. And I think I like that because it has Shutterwalk not as an entire game plan, but as a curve topper that can also start doing really busted stuff if you Grumble in the right order, or if Grumble triggers in the right order, then you start just being a broken Shutterwalk deck. Yeah. So it's really nice as a one card, kind of not nearly as busted, but I was gonna say Yogg, but it's more like a Cthulhu in that it's a curve topper in that sense. That can also just end the game.
Yep, that makes sense. But yeah, I also not a fan of. I'm just not a huge fan of Grumble in the decks. Obviously, you need it if you're doing the combo version, but the Grumble just never felt when I was playing it. It never felt great to return stuff to my hand because I never felt like I was short on card economy. It felt like I just needed to be able to develop boards, and Grumble takes away your board.
Yeah, I mean, full combo is going to be relevant if a quest rogue style of deck needs to happen where you are targeting hard control, because when you go off with Shutterwalk, it's 30 points of damage and healing per turn, right? Every single turn for the rest of the game, you just 30, 30, 30, 30. It's infinite damage over time, and it's really hard for you to ever die when that happens, because also you're chaining glacial shards and other various powerful effects. It has to occupy a niche in the meta, and it is seeing more success now on this day 1 or day 2 than it was the last time there was a day 1 or day 2, because there were so many other powerful decks that were situated well against it. But now I think it has an opportunity to carve out a niche in the meta that Questro kind of left behind, and that Mind Blast Priest will have difficulty with all the armor that Drew generates, because Shutterwalk does not care about your armor. It takes an extra turn to deal you 30 and gain 30 life, but that's good enough.
Oh yeah, also it's real good against Mind Blast Priest because Healing Rain is a problem for Mind Blast Priest, yes. And so is Kalimos. Kalimos gaining 12 is real good.
I think I played against it twice so far with Mind Blast Priest. One time I beat it because, sometimes you just land 2 Twilight Drakes and start hitting them really hard, and then they have to Healing Rain, and then Alex draws it after. But then another time Alex draws it after, Healing Rained, and then they were dead next turn, but then they shutter walked, and then I was off by 3. And then the next turn they just gained 30. I was like, okay, I'm dead.
Yep. So the matchups I like with the various shutter walk decks are like Tempo Mage, Mind Blast Priest, and Taunt Druid, which I think are obviously all decks we said are going up, so seems like a good, well positioned going forward.
Yes, and that's our explanations. And remember, this is all it's day 2 as of the time of this recording. Things will change from what we just said. By the time we post this podcast in 2 days, things will change from what we just said. So be aware, this is still a time of lots of flux and a time to try out new things. And if you want to hit Legend, go pick the decks with the highest win rates that are proven quantities right now. But if you're willing to try things out, now is the time where we don't really know what's good. We have an idea, but nothing is proven, and any list you see on Twitter yesterday or today that is top 20 or 30 Legend or whatever, don't assume that that will still be the terror of the ladder in a week. Just remember that what you see right now, take everything with a grain of salt. If they're not literal jokes like the odd spiteful druid that someone posted yesterday where it was hitting 5-mana spells, which was an actual joke. Like, not even someone was playing it for fun. Like, this was a troll that they made specifically for Twitter. But there are also going to be lists that better players are going to use in unsolved metagames and then will struggle with 2 days later because the meta is so undefined. So, be aware. But the last question we have to ask, well, we've got a couple questions, but the first one is,
how long can this go on?
and we want to say thanks before we get out of here to a bunch of people. First, thanks to Stephanel for letting us use his cover. Check him out in his channel, linked in our show notes. Big thanks to Hearthstone Top Decks, Beerbrick.com for Decklists, Hearthstone Tournaments on YouTube for Tournament VODs, Old Guardian, and Steve Wickedgood for Decklist and analysis and infographics and fun stuff. Show notes for this week's episode are on our website at CoinConcede.com. You can support our show at patreon.com/CoinConcede. Your support helps keep the show running. Join us every week live by following us on Twitch, twitch.tv/CoinConcedePodcast. Join our community chats in our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com. Write into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at CoinConcede. And head over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Calum, Viriatus, and
It's so
Fluffy. And big thanks to Swaggo Gaming. They just announced their member monthly and gaming community today. We retweeted on our Twitter. Definitely go check it out. And the next question, we've got 2 more. This one is, who are you coin conceding to this week? And Botticus, you get to go first.
So, for reasons that I cannot announce yet, but I want to coin concede to Ben Reddington, and hopefully we'll get to announce something soon. That's announcement of an announcement, maybe. But yeah,
You're
shout out
getting
to
all
that guy.
blizzardy in here.
Yeah. That's all I have to say about that.
Yes, Ben Reddington's a good dude, and he is truly a dad legend. Appa.
I want to coin concede to whoever it was that looked at Dead Man Tan Warrior and said, all right, Cold Light Oracle's gone. How do we replace that? And then they thought Firefly and Battle Rage, because that is absolutely brilliant. And I've been thinking about that since you said it like an hour ago in the podcast.
Dude, it's so sweet because you get to you want to use the Garrosh hero power every turn anyways, and occasionally you're like warpathing stuff, and so Battle Rage naturally works pretty well with the cards you have in your deck. But I was watching him on stream, it's like, Firefly? Why is there Firefly? And then he was like, Dead Man's Hand, Firefly, Flame Elemental, Whirlwind, Battle Rage, bring it on, bring it on. I was like, oh, I get it now.
It's just so cool. Like,
yeah.
I don't think for as long as I play Hearthstone, I'll ever be as good of a deck builder as like whoever put that in there, because like these kind of intricacies are just like so neat that somebody's like, we lost Cold Light. What do we put in there instead of Cold Light Oracle? Fireflies. And then it just works like the same. It's so cool.
It's like adding arcane intellect to your battle rage.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it was his tournament to win. Like, Maverick should probably get one of my coin concedes this week, but he has enough money now. He won a Dreamhack. He's fine. And I'm going to give a couple coin concedes. First of all, to Deck Tech, and also to Burger and Lobster, the restaurant we went to. He's a good dude, and they had both, and I had both in the same sandwich, and it was amazing. Big props to the Serious Talk channel in our coin concede Discord. It is a very deep place, I guess, like politics, religion, ethics, whatever you want to talk about, that's kind of a safe space for it, and we're pretty open about it and respectful in the process. But there was a lot of good discussion today about the nature of rage ads in Hearthstone, and there was a tweet this past weekend where someone tagged a bunch of prolific Hearthstone Twitter personalities with a rage ad they had gotten. And there were a couple tweets back and forth. Frodan in particular had a tweet saying, let's not get going into Witch Hunt. And there's a lot of discussion about that. And I'm not going to get into it now because we're already over 2 hours. But I will say that the depth of discussion encountered in that channel continues to surprise me every day. So big props to all the people that occupy that space. And big shout out to Swagoi Gaming for being awesome.
Yeah, Hat and I have been fairly active today in the Serious channel, and I think even though we had some differing views from multiple different people, I don't know, it's just really interesting, mature discussion between everybody, and nobody really stepped on anybody else's toes. We just talked about our perspectives and stuff, and it's really interesting to do that sometimes.
Yes, it's our Discord continues to be the best part of our community, I think, and I really am grateful for it every day. All right, the last question. Hey, Botticus, where can people find you?
You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at BotticusAHS. And it'd be great if you followed me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Botticus. I usually do my streaming mostly on the weekends. This weekend, I'm going to be doing a lot of practicing, hopefully for Austin, but I also need to try to get higher on ladder because I'm not in a very good spot right now on ladder. And I need to have a good finish this month. So I don't know what's going to happen, but follow me on there, and if you follow me on Twitter, I post when I'm going live. So
Appa?
That's me.
You can find me on Twitter, where I basically exist now, at Appa_HS. And then I have my Twitch strike through here, and I'm gonna unstrike through that because excuse me, in I think about 9 or 10 days. Well, we're moving in 8 days, and then in 9 or 10 days, I think I'll be able to start streaming again, because we'll have separate bedroom, which will be a game room, so I won't be disturbing Taylor when she's trying to sleep. So I'll probably start streaming full time again fairly soon, probably in a little over a week and a half.
Appa streaming hype. I'm excited for some of that delicious salty streaming. And then you can find me on Twitter at RidiculousHat, or on Twitch, twitch.tv/RidiculousHat on Mondays and Thursdays. And that'll do it for our show. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. Really glad to have you all here, and we will see you next week. But until then, keep calm and rogue on. And if you see us on the ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
Take cold comfort in your victory.
You win. I can rest now. You win. For now. Now, your victory proves nothing.
The day is yours.
I choose death.
You have triumphed. This time.
This hunt is yours.